In a small village by the Nile River, where nature and humanity thrived in harmony, a dark secret lay hidden. Chipo, a spirited young girl, never imagined that delivering dinner to the mysterious old man Baraka would plunge her into a haunting night. Within the creaking walls of his locked house, an ancient curse began to unravel, pulling Chipo into a battle between light and shadow. Can she overcome her fears and break the darkness threatening her peaceful village? One serene evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the village was bathed in a soft, golden glow. The sky painted itself in hues of amber and violet, creating a picturesque backdrop for the lively laughter of children by the river. Among them was Chipo, her laughter ringing out like chimes as she splashed in the cool, refreshing water with her friends. They were carefree, savoring the last traces of daylight as shadows began to lengthen across the land. The tranquility of the moment was broken by the familiar sound of her mother's voice, firm yet loving, calling out from the heart of the village. Chipo, it's time to come home. Bahati's voice carried over the distance, echoing against the trees. Chipo reluctantly bid farewell to her friends, her hand waving in the fading light. Barefoot and agile, she raced toward her home, the soft dust rising in her wake. The small mud hut, humble yet warm, stood waiting. Her mother, Bahati, stood outside, her face etched with a mix of concern and determination. Chipo, Bahati began, her tone serious but calm. I have an important task for you. Chipo's young heart began to pound, both from the urgency in her mother's voice and her own sense of duty. What is it, Mama? She asked, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her chest. Bahati rested her hands gently on Chipo's shoulders, her gaze deep and unwavering. Old man Baraka hasn't been well. I promised him dinner. I need you to take this basket of food to his house at the edge of the village. But listen to me, my child, the path can be treacherous at night. You must be careful. A chill ran down Chipo's spine. The stories about the path to Baraka's house were as vivid in her mind as the setting sun, tales of restless spirits and prowling wild animals. Yet she squared her shoulders, pushing aside her fear. I'll be careful, Mama. I promise. Bahati embraced her daughter tightly, her voice soft but resolute. Thank you, my brave girl. Go quickly now, before the darkness settles in. With the basket clutched tightly in her hands, Chipo set off. The path was narrow and winding, its edges cloaked in tall grass and thorny bushes that seemed to reach for her as she passed. Each step took her further from the comforting sounds of the village and deeper into the unsettling stillness of the night. The quiet was oppressive, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Chipo's mind raced with the whispered tales of danger, each shadow and sound magnified by her growing apprehension. As she approached Baraka's house, a faint flicker of light appeared in the distance, a solitary lantern glowing like a beacon in the darkness. Relief surged through her, dispelling some of her fear, quickening her pace. She finally reached the old man's door and knocked, her knuckles trembling as they met the weathered wood. The door creaked open slowly, revealing Baraka. His aged face, marked by time, bore a solemn wisdom. Despite his years, his eyes sparkled with clarity and warmth. Good evening, Baraka, Chipo said, her voice wavering slightly. My mother sent me with some food for you. A kind smile softened Baraka's features. Thank you, child. Your mother is a blessing to this village. Please. Come in. Hesitant but polite, Chipo stepped inside. The small, modest home was illuminated by the flickering firelight, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The room was sparsely furnished, with a few old chairs and a table, but it exuded a strange sense of history. As Chipo settled into a chair, she noticed an unusually large, heavy lock on the bedroom door. Its presence unsettled her, stirring questions she dared not voice. Baraka seemed to sense her unease and chuckled softly. It's just an old lock to keep the wind from rattling the door. Nothing to worry about. Chipo nodded, though the explanation did little to ease her curiosity. She handed the basket to Baraka, who began unpacking the food with gratitude. Would you stay a while? Baraka asked gently. It's lonely here at night. Chipo hesitated. Darkness had already settled outside, and the thought of walking back alone sent a shiver through her. Reluctantly, she agreed. As they shared a simple meal, Baraka regaled Chipo with tales of his younger days, adventures in distant lands, encounters with mysterious people, and treasures both tangible and intangible. His voice carried a mesmerizing rhythm, drawing vivid pictures in Chipo's mind. Time passed unnoticed until a yawn escaped her lips. The old man smiled. You should rest here tonight. The path is no place for a young girl after dark. Though reluctant, Chipo knew he was right. Baraka showed her to a small bed in the corner. As she lay down, the unease returned, the heavy lock on the door a silent reminder of her lingering doubts. The night deepened, and the house grew quiet, save for the occasional creak of its wooden frame. Sleep eluded Chipo as her mind raced with fragments of stories and unanswered questions. Just as her eyelids began to droop, a sound pierced the silence, the unmistakable creak of the locked door. Her eyes flew open, her heart pounding. In the dim light, she saw Baraka standing in the doorway, his face obscured by shadow. What's wrong, Baraka? Chipo asked, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. The old man didn't answer. His silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Instead, he stepped into the room, his movements deliberate and slow, closing the door with a soft yet ominous click. The sound of the lock snapping into place echoed in her ears, sending a jolt of panic through her veins. Baraka! What are you doing? She cried, her voice rising as she instinctively backed away. Her heart pounded, a relentless drumbeat of fear. But Baraka said nothing. He just stood there, a dark silhouette against the dim light filtering through the curtain. His eyes glinted in the shadows, unreadable yet piercing, like a predator sizing up its prey. Chipo's mind raced. Her instincts screamed at her to run. But the door was blocked, and Baraka's towering frame seemed immovable. Trapped. The word clawed at her consciousness as she scanned the room for an escape. Her eyes landed on a small window, partially obscured by a heavy curtain. A flicker of hope sparked within her, a desperate, fragile hope. She lunged toward the window, her legs trembling as adrenaline surged through her body. Her fingers fumbled with the latch, slick with sweat and trembling with urgency. It wouldn't budge. She tugged harder, panic clawing at her throat as the reality of her situation loomed. Behind her, she could hear Baraka's slow, deliberate footsteps drawing closer, each step an unbearable weight on her fragile resolve. Come on, she whispered through gritted teeth. Tears pooling in her eyes as she fought with the unyielding latch. Just as she felt the warmth of his presence at her back, the latch gave way with a sudden snap, and the window swung open. Chipo didn't hesitate. She pushed herself through the narrow opening, her body scraping against the edges as she tumbled outside. She landed hard on the ground below, the impact jarring her bones and scraping her hands and knees against the rough earth. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The cold night air stung her lungs as she sprinted into the darkness, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. Fear drove her forward, her feet pounding against the earth. Her only thought to escape, to survive. Behind her, the oppressive silence of the night was deafening. The darkness seemed alive, pressing in on her. But she didn't dare look back. Each shadow felt like a pair of unseen eyes watching, waiting. Chipo's thoughts churned in chaos. What had happened to Baraka? What had turned the kind old man she once trusted into this silent, looming figure of menace? She didn't know. All she knew was that she had to get away. The lights of her village appeared in the distance, shimmering like a beacon of salvation. Chipo's tears blurred her vision as she stumbled toward them, her legs burning with exhaustion. By the time she reached her home, she was barely holding herself together. She burst through the door, her sobs uncontrollable, her body trembling from head to toe. Bahati and Tumalo rushed to her side, their faces etched with alarm. Chipo. What happened? Bahati's voice quivered, her hands gently cradling her daughter's face. Chipo tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat, choked by her overwhelming fear. She clung to her mother as if letting go would shatter her entirely. It's okay, my child, Bahati whispered, her voice soothing yet strained with worry. You're safe now. I've got you. But Chipo didn't feel safe. The memory of Baraka's unblinking stare, his haunting silence, lingered like a shadow in her mind. She couldn't shake the dread that had taken root deep in her chest. In the days that followed, Chipo barely spoke. Sleep eluded her, and her appetite vanished. Her mother and brother tried to comfort her, but the terror of that night loomed too large. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in hues of amber and gold, Bahati sat down beside Chipo. Her expression was a mixture of determination and heartbreak. Chipo, she began softly. I need to know what happened that night. You haven't spoken about it, and I can see it's eating you alive. Chipo hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of her blanket tightly. The memories she had tried so hard to suppress clawed their way to the surface. With a trembling breath, she began. I went to Baraka's house like you asked me to, she said, her voice barely audible. At first, it was fine. We ate dinner, and he told me stories. But then everything changed. He locked me in the bedroom. Bahati's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. He locked you in. Why would he do that? I don't know, Chipo whispered, tears streaming down her face. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me. I've never been so scared. Bahati pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, her own tears spilling over. I'm so sorry, my child. I never should have sent you there. Chipo clung to her mother, a torrent of emotions overwhelming her. The weight of her fear and confusion finally poured out, leaving her drained but oddly lighter. "We need to understand what happened to Baraka," Bahati said, her voice steely with resolve. "Whatever changed him that night. We can't ignore it. We have to find out why." As the sun disappeared completely, the darkness seemed less suffocating. And for the first time in days, Chipo felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, Bahati and Chipo went to see the village elder, a wise and respected woman named Kaisai. Her hut, adorned with herbs and symbols of protection, exuded an air of quiet authority. As they recounted the events of the previous night, Kaisai sat silently, her sharp eyes fixed on Chipo. She listened intently, her fingers steepled, her brow furrowing deeper with every detail. When they finished, she sighed heavily, her voice tinged with grave concern. "This is troubling indeed," Kaisai began, her tone low but firm. "Baraka has always been a man of kindness and integrity. But something profound must have shifted within him. We must uncover the truth of this change before it brings harm to us all." Determined to act swiftly, Kaisai gathered a group of trusted villagers. They moved together as a somber procession toward Baraka's house, the air thick with tension and unspoken fears. Chipo clung to her mother's side, her small hand trembling in Bahati's firm grip. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart thudding like a drum against her ribs. A cocktail of fear and curiosity churned within her, threatening to overwhelm her resolve. When they arrived, Baraka's house stood eerily still. The wooden door hung slightly ajar, swaying ever so slightly in the morning breeze. The stillness was unnatural, a stark contrast to the vibrant sounds of the surrounding village. The group hesitated, calling out Baraka's name in unison. Their voices echoed into the void, swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Let us search the house," Kaisai instructed, her voice steady but commanding. "There may be clues that will shed light on this mystery." The villagers spread out cautiously, their footsteps creaking against the floorboards. Shadows danced across the walls as they combed through the dimly lit rooms. Chipo stayed close to her mother, her breath shallow, her every sense heightened. When they entered the bedroom, a peculiar sight greeted them. A heavy, ancient lock lay on the ground, its surface etched with intricate, otherworldly symbols. It was the same lock that had imprisoned Chipo the night before. "What in the spirit's names is this?" one of the villagers murmured, holding the lock gingerly as though it might bite. Kaisai stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "This is no ordinary lock," she declared, her voice laden with unease. "It bears the markings of enchantment." "Enchanted?" Chipo asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does that mean?" "It means this lock was imbued with powerful magic," Kaisai explained. "Someone, perhaps Baraka, used this spell to bind the door. But the real question is why? What could he have been trying to keep in, or out?" Their search unearthed more enigmas. A tattered book, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and archaic writings. A pouch of dried herbs that exuded an unsettling, earthy scent. And finally, a wooden figurine, crudely carved yet exuding an aura of palpable malevolence. Each item deepened the mystery, casting a shadow over Baraka's intentions. "These objects carry a dark energy," Kaisai said gravely, wrapping them in a cloth. "We must take them to Yemi, the shaman. He may help us understand their purpose." The villagers agreed, their unease growing as they made their way to the shaman's hut at the edge of the forest. Yemi, a man of quiet power, greeted them as though he had been expecting their arrival. "I have felt the disturbance," Yemi said, his deep voice resonating like the low rumble of thunder. "The air is thick with restless spirits." Keisai presented the items, explaining the events in detail. Yemi examined each artifact with reverence, muttering ancient incantations as he waved his hands over them. His expression darkened as he worked, his brow furrowing with recognition and concern. "This is dark magic," Yemi announced after a long pause. "It appears that Baraka was trying to protect something, or someone." A chill ran down Chipo's spine. "Protect someone? Who?" she asked, her voice quivering. Yemi met her gaze, his eyes filled with sorrow and an edge of warning. "That I cannot yet discern. But whatever it is, it holds great power. Power that is both dangerous and unpredictable." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Dark magic was not to be trifled with, and Baraka's disappearance only added to their fears. Yemi's conclusion was clear: Baraka held the answers, and he must be found. Days stretched into weeks with no sign of the missing man. It was as if he had dissolved into the mist, leaving behind only questions and an ominous void. Chipo tried to return to her routines, but the weight of uncertainty clung to her like a shadow. She often felt eyes on her, as though something unseen watched her every move. One night, as she lay in bed, a faint whisper pierced the stillness. At first, she dismissed it as the wind threading through the cracks in the walls. But then she heard it again. Clearer this time, a voice, soft yet insistent, calling her name. "Chipo." Her heart thudded in her chest as she sat up, straining to catch the sound. The room was cloaked in darkness, but a faint, ethereal glow seeped through the window, compelled by a force she couldn't explain. Chipo rose, her bare feet brushing against the cool floor. She approached the window, her breath hitching. There, at the edge of the village, stood a lone figure bathed in moonlight. It was Baraka. Chipo froze, her mind torn between terror and a strange, magnetic pull. She wanted to cry out for her mother, to raise the alarm, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she stood rooted to the spot, watching as Baraka's shadowed form beckoned her silently, his presence both haunting and irresistible. She slipped out of the house, her bare feet barely making a sound as they met the cool earth below. The night enveloped her in its quiet embrace, the distant chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves the only companions to her steady breathing. As Chipo approached Baraka, she noticed something unsettlingly different about him. His once sharp, penetrating eyes, so full of wisdom and strength, now seemed dulled, clouded with a profound sorrow that weighed on his every movement. "Chipo," Baraka murmured, his voice barely audible, trembling under the weight of unspoken truths. "I'm so sorry." Chipo's chest tightened, a lump forming in her throat as worry began to claw at her. "What happened? Baraka? Why did you lock me in the bedroom? Why did you shut me out?" Her voice, though steady, betrayed a hint of desperation. Baraka exhaled deeply, his shoulders slumping under an invisible burden. "I was trying to protect you," he admitted, the words heavy with regret. "There is a darkness that has lingered in this village, a curse that I've fought against for years. I thought I could keep it at bay, but I failed. The magic, it consumed me." Chipo's breath hitched, A curse? What kind of curse? Baraka. Please. Tell me everything. Baraka tilted his head back, his gaze locking on the silver glow of the moon. Its light illuminated his face, etched with lines of pain and remorse. Long ago, he began, his voice carrying the weight of a storyteller recounting a tale too real to dismiss. This village was tormented by a powerful spirit. It brought sickness, despair, and death. The people lived in constant fear, desperate for salvation. I used my magic to trap the spirit within a wooden figure, a vessel to contain its malevolence. For years, it stayed hidden in my home. But the magic, its power was too great. Slowly, it began to corrupt me, to seep into my soul. A chill coursed through Chipo's veins, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. The wooden figure, she whispered, her voice trembling. The one we found in your house. Baraka nodded solemnly, his expression grave. Yes. That figure is the prison for the spirit. I tried to keep it locked away, hidden from the world. But the darkness has its ways. It found cracks, a path to escape. I didn't want to hurt you, Chipo. His voice broke, and he looked away, shame evident in his demeanor. I only wanted to protect you, from it and from me. Tears welled up in Chipo's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stepped closer, her determination growing stronger with each word. What do we do now? Baraka? How do we end this? Baraka reached out, his hand trembling yet firm as it clasped hers. His eyes, though weary, carried a flicker of hope. We must destroy the figure, he said firmly. It's the only way to sever the spirit's hold and break the curse. Chipo nodded, resolve settling in her heart like an unshakable stone. Then let's do it. Together. Back at Baraka's house, they gathered the villagers, their faces pale and wary. Chipo's voice carried over the crowd as she explained what had transpired. Among them, Yemi and Leo stepped forward, their expressions mirroring her determination. They agreed without hesitation that the figure had to be destroyed, and plans for a ritual to banish the spirit were quickly set in motion. That night, under the watchful gaze of the moon, the villagers gathered around a roaring bonfire. The air was thick with anticipation and the mingled sense of burning wood and herbs. Yemi stood at the center, her deep, resonant voice carrying the sacred chants that would summon the spirit from its vessel. The wooden figure, small yet ominous, was placed at the heart of the flames. As the fire consumed it, a thick, black smoke began to rise, twisting and writhing as though alive. Gasps filled the air as the smoke took on a grotesque form. A face filled with rage and malice. Its eyes burned with a hatred so intense that Chipo felt her knees weaken. Gripping Baraka's hand tightly, she refused to look away. The chants grew louder, Yemi's voice unwavering against the spirit's wrath. The flames leaped higher, their light piercing the darkness. The smoke writhed violently, as though fighting to escape. But the ritual's power held firm. Slowly, the malevolent energy began to dissipate, the twisted face fading into the night like a bad memory finally put to rest. With one last, blood-curdling scream, the spirit was gone. A wave of relief washed over the crowd, and the villagers erupted into cheers, their voices filled with a newfound joy. The curse that had plagued them for so long had been lifted, and for the first time in years, Hope blossomed in their hearts. Baraka turned to Chipo. His smile filled with gratitude and pride. "Thank you, Chipo," he said softly. "You have a brave heart. Stronger than I could have imagined." Chipo embraced the old man. A sense of peace enveloping her like a warm blanket. For the first time in weeks, the oppressive weight of fear was gone. The darkness had been vanquished. And the village could finally heal. In the days that followed, life returned to the village as if waking from a long, dark dream. The fields flourished, their vibrant greens a testament to the renewal of life. Laughter echoed through the streets as children played, their joy untainted by fear. Birds sang from the treetops, their melodies weaving a symphony of hope. Chipo found herself smiling more often, her heart lightened by the knowledge that the darkness was no more. And though the memory of that night would linger, it served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of unity in the face of even the greatest darkness. As the first rays of sunlight touched the Nile village, warmth and hope returned to its people. Chipo stood by the riverbank, gazing toward Baraka's now empty house. A place that once held secrets but now rested in peace. She knew that although the darkness had been vanquished, Baraka's story and his silent sacrifices would remain a valuable lesson for the village. Chipo had grown stronger and wiser through her ordeal. Her courage and faith in humanity had become her guiding light. She realized that, in the darkest moments, bravery and hope could illuminate the path forward. Returning to her mother and little brother, Chipo made a promise to herself: she would continue to live boldly, seek new horizons, and share the light she had found in life's lessons. From Baraka's story, the entire village learned that unity and trust in the good were the ultimate weapons against any darkness. Never shy away from confronting your fears. Only by facing them directly can you overcome them. Kindness holds transformative power. Helping others can heal not just them but also yourself. Seek support when you need it. Don't hesitate to lean on family, friends, or your community. Trust with caution. Trust builds connections. But always remain vigilant. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any exciting upcoming content. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep creating even better videos. See you in the next one.